overhaul of our tax system in more than 3 decades. The House this afternoon passed the sweeping $1.5 trillion legislation, and tonight we're awaiting the Senate's vote on the measure. We'll have special coverage on this critical vote with an A-list lineup of guests tonight. Chairman of the powerful Ways and Means Committee, Kevin Brady, Freedom Caucus Chairman, Congressman Mark Meadows, Congressman Andy Biggs, all joining us here tonight. In addition, Republicans are ramping up efforts to purge the deep state. There are growing calls tonight for FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe to be fired over his conflicts of interest. McCabe today interviewed by lawmakers behind closed doors on Capitol Hill. We'll take up the political corruption at the Department of Justice with George Washington University law professor Jonathan Turley. And federal officials say an Amtrak train traveling 80 miles an hour per hour in a 30-mile-an-hour zone derailed in Washington state. That seems to be the principal cause that investigators are now looking into. The engineer may as well have been distracted by the presence of an employee in training next to him. We'll have the latest on the deadly derailment. Our top story tonight, Republicans moving closer to delivering tax cuts to President Trump before Christmas. The House this afternoon approved the most sweeping tax rewrite in decades along party lines. But that legislation hitting a glitch in the Senate, which means the House will have to vote on the legislation again tomorrow. Fox News senior producer for Capitol Hill, Chad Pergram, live now on Capitol Hill with the latest. Good evening, Chad. Let me ask, first of all, what is this so-called glitch in the Senate that they had to deal with, causing the House to have to revote?
It's not a glitch in the most conventional sense, but what happens is that the House and the Senate have to be in alignment. They have to approve the same bill. The Senate lives under a special set of budgetary circumstances that the House does not. They've been considering this tax bill under a special process called budget reconciliation. The reason they're doing it under these special budget rules is to avoid a filibuster. Otherwise, this would be filibustered. You need 60 votes to break a filibuster.
You lost me at hello tonight. If it's not a glitch, what is it?
The short answer is the bills aren't in sync. They have to toss out certain provisions.
They don't say the same thing.
They won't by the end of tonight. That's right. The Senate will have approved a bill that doesn't align with the House. And in order to get something to the president's desk, the House and the Senate have to sync up. And so the Senate will approve a different bill, slightly different from what the House okayed earlier today, and then they will send it back across Capitol Hill, and they will approve that. That will be a fait accompli. I asked Vice President Pence earlier if this was a problem, and he said, no, we're good where we are. This isn't a problem.
And not a problem. What does that mean for the Senate's passage of the legislation tonight, necessary to get into alignment tomorrow with the House and their revote?
This isn't going to cost them any votes. There are going to be a maximum of 99 senators voting. They're going to have at least 50 yeas. We're still waiting to hear from Republican Senator Jeff Flake, who is the one senator who's on the fence here. He was a yes when they voted on the bill in late November, but we still haven't heard from him. And just before I came on the air, Lou, we got a little more information about the timing tonight. We expect speakers to be on the floor to about 10:55, 11 o'clock. That's how many speakers have booked floor time. They will then have a procedural vote on this glitch, as you put it, trying to sync up with the House and the Senate. It'll get tossed. That's why it has to go back. And then a final vote will start probably around 11:30 with a final result around midnight. And Vice President Pence will be here. He's expected to preside. He is not expected to have to break a tie because they're going to have that odd number of senators voting.
One show host's glitch is a Senate parliamentarian's insistence on due process of parliamentary order. And we appreciate it, Chad. Thanks for bringing it up. So we're looking at after 10 for this vote by the Senate.
Looking at about 11:30, close to midnight. Yeah.
Well, then let's all get ready, because here we go. Chad,
Absolutely.
Thanks so much.
Anytime.
Chad Pergram. My first guest tonight says today's vote puts Americans one step closer to more jobs, bigger paychecks, and fairer taxes. I'm joined now by the top tax writer in the House, and he is Congressman Kevin Brady, the powerful chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee. And I get to say congratulations to you all over again. We're going to get one more in, it looks like, before it's done because of what I shamelessly called a glitch in the Senate. with the revote in the House tomorrow.
Yeah, Lou, one, thank you. And look, if there's anything better than voting for tax cuts once, it's doing it twice. And so, this is not a problem. I think the Senate's going to deliver on its promise tonight. We certainly will do this tomorrow and headed to the president's desk. But this is, as you said, by any measure for the past 3 decades, a major change in this horrible tax code. So we're pleased.
And this is, as you know, Mr. Chairman, I mean, this is a big deal for a lot of reasons, but not least of which, in addition to the money that will be moving to the middle class by the most favored outlook and analysis, 23% of the cuts are going to the middle class. That's important because the president talked about middle class tax cuts here. Alignment with small business and corporate America. I don't see how anyone at this juncture, at least, could possibly say anything other than about this economy. It's going to continue its historic ascent.
It really is. Look, this is all about getting the economy going. Look, it has picked up significantly since President Trump became president, but we think it can do better. And every economist tells us, look, it's going to be that old slow growth of the last 10 years unless we change. That's what this tax reform is all about. President Trump ought to feel terrific. He said, he pledged, I'm going to deliver tax reform this year. He's getting it for the middle class, for small businesses, and you're going to see American jobs coming back home. So I credit President Trump, leadership, working with us in the House and Senate. That's why we're here today.
Yeah, and it's a fairly simple algorithm to examine. Your insistence, that of the House leadership, on tax cuts and focus on it, as the president asked, as the American people asked, because he ran specifically as president on that issue. The algorithm, what is different about this and any other year in which the Republicans have been in charge? Donald J. Trump. And we've seen this economy move from the Obama new normal of less than 2% to now 2 consecutive quarters of 3% or higher. And in the fourth quarter, the most recent reading has us right at 4% economic growth. That has got to take even the most skeptical and nasty and venomous of the left who attack him kind of back on their heels.
You would think, Lou, but I'm sure that won't stop them. But I'll tell you what, today was about one simple question. Who decides? Who decides who spends that money you work so hard to earn? We chose you to do that rather than Washington. I think that's why the left is fighting so furiously and so feverishly against this. Look, if you get to decide how to spend your money, they can't. Everything changes in Washington when that happens.
Absolutely, and you are a big reason that it changed. I want to just congratulate you, see where we are. When do you expect that revote tomorrow to take place?
Yeah,
and to be ready to move this legislation to the president's desk?
I would think shortly after lunch, the last vote will be held on this, and we'll go to the president's desk. And again, a big promise delivered to the American people on time. That's what he asked for. That's what we fought to do. And so, yeah, this is good for Americans.
It's good for America. It is also good for America to see the Republican Party controlling both houses of Congress and the White House do what you've said you're going to do. And there were at points in 2017, as we both know, it looked like it was going to be impossible for Republicans to get together on the basic fundamental building blocks of this agenda.
Yeah, no, it did, and there was reason to be skeptical. But look, tax reform is why I think all of us came to Congress. I mean, that's why we ran in the first place. We know this issue. We care about. We're passionate about getting those jobs going, get those jobs back to America. And we have a president who's right in sync with all of it. So I'm really proud of our House Republicans, including my Ways and Means Committee members, who delivered this tax reform plan.
All right. Well, Chairman Brady, we appreciate you being with us. And again, I'm going to say it again. I'm not getting tired of saying this. Congratulations.
Thank you, Lou.
Good to have you with us. We're coming right back. There is much more to the day's political developments as well. and we're going to take each and every one of them on here tonight. Stay with us. President Trump on the verge of a major legislative victory after the historic tax reform bill passes the House.
New Year's Day, America will have a new tax code for a new era of American prosperity.
We have special coverage of the largest tax overhaul since 1986. New reports that Special Counsel Robert Mueller's witch hunt could stretch into 2018. And how long will the Special Counsel Robert Mueller's witch hunt go on? Constitutional expert Jonathan Turley joins us with his assessment. He's here next. Stay with us. The other major developments in Washington center on efforts to root out political corruption at the highest levels of the Justice Department and the FBI. Top Republicans are now suggesting FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe should be ousted amid allegations of his conflicts of interest and anti-Trump bias. McCabe himself today testified before the House Intel Committee behind closed doors. Fox News Chief Washington Correspondent James Rosen has our report.
After intense wrangling between the branches, even threats of contempt citations, Deputy FBI Director Andrew McCabe appeared at last before the House Intelligence Committee for interrogation behind closed doors.
There are a ton of questions. Andrew McCabe cuts across every facet of every investigation in 2016 that your viewers are interested in.
McCabe first drew scrutiny when it was revealed that his wife, a candidate for office in Virginia, received nearly $500,000 from a group controlled by Virginia Governor Terry McAuliffe, a close ally of Bill and Hillary Clinton. McCabe then oversaw the FBI investigation into Secretary Clinton's private server.
We've been asking for McCabe since March.
House Intelligence Chairman Devin Nunes and his team are also probing McCabe's involvement, if any, with the Fusion GPS dossier, the Democrat-funded opposition research document that was funneled to the FBI in July 2016, then purportedly used to obtain a warrant for surveillance on a Trump campaign advisor.
And it also talks about a discussion in Andrew's office, and that could be Andrew McCabe.
And then there is Peter Strzok, the FBI official removed from the special counsel's Russia investigation for sending anti-Trump text messages to a colleague, including one that said, "I want to believe the path you threw out for consideration in Andy's office, that there's no way he," meaning Donald Trump, "gets elected. But I'm afraid we can't take that risk. It's like an insurance policy in the unlikely event you die before you're 40.
And that sounds like collusion within the FBI. The idea that the entire FBI is full of a bunch of liberals, like, I grew up in a very liberal household in a very liberal neighborhood. No one said, please be an FBI agent.
Another key figure to whom the House Intelligence Committee has demanded access, demoted Justice Department official Bruce Orr, revealed by Fox News to have met secretly with the men behind that anti-Trump dossier, is set to appear for questioning on Wednesday before the Senate Intelligence Committee. Lou?
Thank you very much, James Rosen. And tomorrow promising to be every bit as fascinating as today. Joining us tonight, George Washington University law professor Jonathan Turley. Professor, great to have you with us. What do you make of it all? Another behind closed doors session with a high-ranking FBI or Justice Department official. Where are we headed here?
Well, that's an excellent question. I think that the positive thing here is that we are getting this testimony. The FBI tends to be very cloistered, very secretive, obviously, much for good reason. But in some cases, it's cultural. They tend to resist efforts by Congress to conduct oversight. They're yielding, finally, in producing these witnesses. And what we learn could be very important in terms of the future of the FBI, the future of these individuals. These are legitimate concerns. I mean, it is a legitimate concern if there was a political influence, not just at the FBI, but in these particular investigations. And it requires greater transparency than most of these FBI officials feel comfortable with.
We've had an extraordinary number of officials appear before the oversight committees, whether it be judiciary, whether it be intelligence, in the House and Senate. And the answers that leaders at the very top of the FBI and Justice Department are giving were interposing the Office of Inspector General as a reason not to give the committee its due as an oversight organization. This is absolutely egregious conduct in my personal judgment, on the part of those officials. They're basically saying that they've got reasons not to permit our Constitution to work. That's arrogance in the extreme.
Well, I'll tell you where I agree is that Congress has for too long allowed any repercussions or any response from Congress. They have a right of oversight. It's as if the IG's office is superior to the legislative branch in Article 1. And I'm glad to see the members of Congress finally flexing that muscle and trying to regain some of that ground. I thought it was a good thing when Chairman Nunes said, we're prepared to hold people in contempt even in a Republican administration if that's what it'll take. I thought that was a good moment, quite frankly, to see Congress acting that way.
I concur wholeheartedly, and I will go a little further. I believe that Chairman Nunes has, if you will, laid out the template for how a chairman of an oversight committee, but in particular intelligence committees, should be conducting themselves assertively, aggressively, within the bounds of the Constitution, and insisting on oversight over these intelligence committees that, in my opinion, since last August, have demonstrated themselves, and by last August I'm referring to actually 2016, when we started hearing from the intelligence community about their political judgments on the candidates who are running for president. They have broached nearly every tradition and demanded standard of propriety on the part of the intelligence community. This has been quite something for the American people to have to put up with.
Well, what really concerns me is that what the committee was asking for was perfectly legitimate. You know, they weren't asking about the investigation, facts about that, as much as the investigators. It was about them, not their targets that they were pursuing. And they have largely obstructed this effort. So this week is a big moment in terms of getting some of these people under oath.
Under oath, and McCabe, what are your thoughts about the calls for him to be fired? This being the man who recused himself 6 days before the election, as we'll recall, having already made most of the decisions that would have been in conflict with him.
You know, Lou, I'm not one of those who have called for him to be fired. I don't think there's evidence to support it. You try to be fair, particularly to people who are working in government. We'll find out a lot about McCabe's conduct, and there may come a time when we have to do that. But I think that at most what we have here is a really problematic response to conflicts, slow, and in my view, not very, what you might say, prophylactic, to try to find ways to avoid conflicts. And instead, a lot of these officials seem comfortable with them. We still have key figures with conflicts of interest in the investigation.
Well, amongst them, Strzok, who has been involved in a number of points of contact in the Clinton investigation, whether it be the emails, whether it be the decision to make a decision to exculpate her. We have the same thing with McCabe, though. He is there involved in a wide swath of these issues under investigation, which on its face seems to, without question, be in conflict, at least in appearance. And why aren't our investigatory agencies and officials being held to the highest standard, not the de minimis?
Well, they should be held to the highest standard. And I think what we learned from this week could very well fill in a lot of these gaps. And, you know, while there may be not grounds for termination, there may be grounds for further separation of McCabe from any involvement. There's certainly grounds to question his judgment. And he's not alone in that. I'm really surprised by the lack of professionalism that's long been the touchstone of the FBI that's coming out, and not just these emails, but in the pattern of decisions that were made.
Professor Jonathan Turley, always great to see you. Thanks for being with us tonight. And we will be, let's talk further, as we most assuredly will need to, as these events continue to unwind. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jonathan Turley. Be sure to vote in tonight's poll. Is there any reason, in your opinion, that FBI Director Christopher Wray should not fire Deputy Director Andrew McCabe for his obvious conflicts, corruption, and collusion with the Clintons. Cast your vote on Twitter at Lou Dobbs. Follow me on Twitter at Lou Dobbs. Like me on Facebook. Follow me on Instagram at Lou Dobbs Tonight. On Wall Street today, stocks closed lower. I hate it when we have these kinds of days. They just interrupt the trajectory. The Dow down 37 points on the day. The S&P down 9. The Nasdaq off 31. Not much of a decline, but nonetheless breaking the trend of up, and away. Volume on the big board, 3.3 billion shares. And strong news on housing. Construction of new homes up more than 3% in November. Single-family homes being built at the strongest rate in a decade. A reminder to listen to my reports 3 times a day, coast to coast on the Salem Radio Network. And up next, Special Counsel Mueller under fire over allegations he illegally obtained Trump transition documents. Congressman Andy Biggs calling for Mueller's resignation, saying the Mueller special counsel investigation is now hopelessly tainted. He joins us here next. A lot more straight ahead. Stay with us. Republican lawmakers championing the tax cut legislation, a boon for the middle class. Congress's Joint Committee on Taxation estimating now that middle-income households will receive $61 billion of those tax cuts in 2019, just about 23% of all of those cuts going to individuals in the middle class. Joining me now, Matt Slapp, chairman of the American Conservative Union. Matt, great to see you.
Great to be with you, Lou.
Let's start with how would you have ever fancied that everything, and I mean everything, would be breaking President Trump's direction as we wind down this year? Whether it is the special counsel, that is breaking his way because the collusion is primarily between Obama and Clinton and their acolytes, and even Russia, it appears. Whether it's the economy, in which he is looking at the most remarkable performance of any president in American history in his first year in office, whether it's foreign policy, where his decisions, his policies, his doctrines are being demonstrated to have won the support of our allies and the high regard of our allies in nearly every quarter of the world.
Yeah, and I just came back from Japan where we had our first Japanese CPAC, and let me tell you, the relationship between Abe and President Trump is strong, and the Japanese people greatly appreciate the respect that President Trump is showing them. And I'd say 2 things, Lou. The first thing is this president has decided that he's going for all the campaign promises. Most Republicans say, look, I said these things, I'll have to go for some, I'll have to relent on some. Donald Trump is going for all those promises, and I think it's making a big difference. I think the second thing is on this, specifically on this tax bill, the president, I think, has had a good gut in knowing the changes that needed to be made along the way, and I think it's a lot of his leadership on this issue that he'll be signing a bill very soon.
Yeah, you know, you said a good gut, and I understand the praise of intuitive success. But I think it's time for people to start talking about the man's intellect, about his judgment, and suggesting he's intuiting all of this, I think is a disservice to him, not by you, but by others.
No, I agree with that.
This is a president making tough judgments in the face of a firestorm of criticism and a 360 degrees of attempted subversion of his presidency.
Yeah, that's right. Look, they don't think he's a legitimate president, or they know he's legitimate, but they don't want to.
I don't want to carry their water. I mean, I really don't even want to hear that anymore.
I agree. And the second thing is that, and I can tell you how many times my wife and I talked about this during the campaign, is that the intellect and the insights into what the arguments really are and to what the opposition's really trying to do, he has been right. After everyone complains about this tweet or that tweet, it turns out over the course of this year, he's been right about the major questions. And I think the American people eventually, even those that have been a little more cynical, are going to come his way when they see the impact on their lives.
Yeah, and if they don't, shame on them, because this is empirically now and a president who's established his capacity, his talent, his intellect in administering the country. It's really quite something to behold.
And I want to add something to that, Lou. I actually think he's a good political leader. I actually think he's doing a good job of leading a pretty tough coalition of folks around this country, and I give him great credit for it.
Yeah, and bringing both the majority leader and the Speaker of the House into accord is not the least of his accomplishments in that regard either. Matt Slack,
right.
as always, great to see you, partner. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Lou. Take care.
We're coming right back with much more. Stay with us. A great day for hard-working, middle-class Americans. President Trump set to sign the historic tax cut legislation. And this is Twig the Sheltie. She's not just a regular sheepdog, if there is such a thing. She'll certainly impress you with her phenomenal athletic skills in and out of the water. She's the star of tonight's video. That video is next, right here. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Some members of Special Counsel Robert Mueller's team say they've been told they may be working on the investigation through 2018. White House attorneys will be meeting with Mueller later this week. They've been assuring President Trump that he will be exonerated by early next year. So what gives? Joining me now, Congressman Andy Biggs, member of the House Judiciary Committee. Congressman, great to see you.
Good beauty, Lou.
I guess you have the best solution. Fire Mueller and move on. It'd be the most expedient. What do you make of these cross currents of accounts that suggest either through next year or early next year?
Well, good grief. Mr. Mueller and his team, some of the people on his team were actually trying to influence the last election. And if Mr. Mueller is allowed to continue his probe for another year, what do you think is going to happen? He's going to try to influence the next election. This is just unacceptable. He had a team that he put together, unvetted, full of bias, not just, the casual bias, but actual real bias, taking actions to undermine the election. And now we know one thing. When the Democrats were accusing President Trump of collusion, it was really them that were colluding with the Russians. This is outrageous. It has to stop. The best thing is for Mr. Mueller to go.
And I have to think, Congressman, that Speaker Ryan should hear you, surely, and those members of Congress who are calling for Mueller to do exactly that. I would have to think that the majority leader of the Senate is hearing you, and that both the leaders of the Congress and the Senate, along with the oversight committees, Judiciary, Intel, are saying the same thing. What are we doing? Why are we tolerating this conduct, this behavior, this obstructionism, this frustration of a duly elected President of the United States?
Yeah, it is amazing to me, and thank goodness Chairman Goodlatte of the Judiciary Committee and Devin Nunes of the Intel Committee, we're taking action. We're subpoenaing people in. We're going to maybe hold some of these people in contempt. That has to happen, but the pressure has to keep up. We're now seeing the dial has turned, that now the majority of Americans, according to a recent poll, they now understand, or beginning to understand, that the Mueller investigation is not fair. They don't trust them any more than we do. And so that has got to weigh in our favor. And at some point, I think critical mass will get there. Mr. Mueller will need to go. But it isn't just Mr. Mueller. That team needs to go. I look at Rod Rosenstein. He needs to go. Andrew McCabe, he needs to go. Jeff Sessions, Christopher Wray, they need to clean out the underbrush of the top-level staff at the DOJ and FBI. If we see that happen, then all of a sudden Americans can once again begin to have trust that this investigation, should there be one, and there really shouldn't be one, is fair. Right now they can't see that. Nobody can see that as fair.
Well, there are a number of your colleagues as well calling for a second special counsel to investigate, if you will, the investigation. At some point, we're going to have an amazing number of special counsel investigations because there is so much to investigate here. It is clear that there are conflicts of interest at the top of the FBI, at the top of the Justice Department. It is clear that there have been actions taken that are in direct conflict with the responsibilities of anyone serving in the Justice Department or the FBI when it comes to the investigation of Hillary Clinton. We also have, I don't know how many people saying, well, you can't investigate a prominent member of a previous administration. Well, why not just say it out loud? They're telling us that Americans have two systems of justice, one for the people who are the elites and one for the rest of us who do not serve in government and high office.
It's outrageous. And so the Inspector General, it's not that Mr. Mueller is telling us about the conflicts. The Inspector General or FOIA requests, and they're going back.
Judicial Watch, right.
Exactly, Judicial Watch. And what we're going to find, I believe, is that the Inspector General is going to say there were many irregularities in the Hillary Clinton investigation. And when that comes out, Christopher Wray told me in Judiciary Committee under questioning that he would unring that bell. And I said, does that mean we're going to open up the investigation? I was led to believe there that they would open up that investigation. And even Mr. Rosenstein has a hard time saying that they wouldn't open up that investigation because it was as slanted as anything else could be. And so we need to open it up. Americans need to see that justice is going to be served. And they need to basically reopen that. And I think that the Inspector General, when he gets done with his report, hopefully, he's going to tell us exactly what went on there, because we know a lot of things that happened with regard to interviews, with regard to destruction of evidence, obstruction of justice. We know that took place.
Well, as we wrap up here, I would urge consideration of another law be passed, and that would be a law against anyone testifying on Capitol Hill using the expression "unring a bell." that would be a priority in my world.
Absolutely.
Congressman, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks.
Andy Biggs. Be sure to vote on our poll tonight. The question is there any reason FBI Director Christopher Wray should not fire Deputy Director Andrew McCabe for his corruption and collusion with the Clintons? Cast your vote on Twitter @LouDobbs. And now, please roll the video we've been waiting all night for, and this is Twig, a one-of-a-kind sheepdog, impressive athlete that he is, in and out of the water, a mighty, mighty skilled little fella. He's using skateboards, skimboards across the waters of sunny Florida. That sounded like California's surfing song there, didn't it? Well, there are people in Florida right now. They're going to riot over that on the beaches. You can't do that. Up next, growing calls for the FBI's deputy director to be fired over conflicts of interest. I'll take that up with attorney Roger Banks. Here next. We're also awaiting a vote from the Senate on tax reform legislation. That vote due tonight. And later, I'll take up the next congressional battle, funding the government, with Freedom Caucus Chairman Mark Meadows, our guest. Much more straight ahead. Stay with us. The Intelligence Committee in the Senate now probing Green Party presidential candidate Jill Stein for possible collusion with Russia. Doggone it. Stein dined with Russian President Vladimir Putin at a 2015 Moscow event, also attended by President Trump's former National Security Advisor, General Michael Flynn. So now she's in the web of intrigue. Joining me now is Roger Banks, attorney, opinion contributor to the Daily Caller. And Roger, great to have you with us.
Thank you.
What do you make of this latest development? Jill Stein trying to build a fifth column in the United States.
Well, first of all, I want to say that sheepdog is a tough act to follow, Lou. But as far as...
not as tough as we'd liked it to have been, to be candid.
Well, the Jill Stein development is interesting to me in the sense that I think there's the senator, the Senate committee, and the Chairman Burr mentioned that there were two campaigns that they were now beginning to look into the evidence of collusion between the campaign and the Russians, and I kind of see Jill Stein as sort of an inconsequential candidate. But I couldn't help but wonder who that second campaign is that they're just starting to look at, and it seems to me that the only one in the general campaign would be Hillary Clinton's campaign. So maybe this is an indication that they are finally looking into that evidence.
Well, don't forget the Libertarian candidate also is running.
That's true. That's true.
It's not exactly a target-rich environment, but there are more than 3 targets.
Well, the one that they should be looking into, I think, would be Hillary Clinton's campaign and her involvement with Fusion GPS and that dossier that was apparently
used. Why in the world, in your opinion, Roger, is the special counsel, almost everyone involved, why are they not all over Fusion GPS investigating the hell out of them?
Well, they sure should be. My question is really, why hasn't a second special counsel been appointed to look into all of these issues that have been demanded, that has been demanded by the House Judiciary Committee?
Right.
And that's really something that is hard to explain.
Well, explain this, if you will. Why in the world shouldn't Christopher Wray, the FBI director, fire Andrew McCabe, his deputy, just on what we know circumstantially about the conflicts of interest and the conduct of that investigation of Hillary Clinton and her emails?
Well, I think, you know, based on the text that we saw, in which he was referenced apparently in that meeting, and the reference to the insurance policy, it sure looks like he is, you know, if you were looking for a face to put on the deep state, I think McCabe would be a good candidate there. I don't know. I mean, from the outside looking in, it looks like the kind of thing where firing would be appropriate. The question I have is, how deep is the deep state? How deep is the bench? And does firing McCabe really get to the problem?
Yeah. Well, the problem is deep and broad and much deeper and broader than any of us suspected, I think, even 2 years ago. Roger Banks, thanks for being with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Lou.
Investigators say the engineer that was operating that high-speed Amtrak train on its inaugural run may have been distracted when it derailed in Washington State yesterday morning. The train was traveling at 80 miles an hour in a 30-mile-an-hour zone on a new track when it went off the rails. 3 passengers killed, more than 70 others injured. Up next, we're awaiting the Senate's historic vote on President Trump's massive tax cuts and reform legislation. We'll take it up with a star-studded guest lineup ahead. Joining us tonight, Congressman Mark Meadows, chair of the Freedom Caucus, Steve Forbes, head of Forbes Media, Greg Jarrett, our legal analyst, among our guests. Here next, stay with us. We'll be right back.